South Korea and the Czech Republic seal more than a dozen deals on nuclear power cooperation alone, the government officials say is clear indication of intentions to institutionalize related partnership across the nuclear ecosystem, including research and development, as well as workforce training. We have details on this edition of Issues and Insiders. Hope your work week is off to a good start. It's Monday afternoon, September 23rd here in Korea, and you're watching Issues and Insiders. Now, South Korea and the Czech Republic signed a total of 56 MOUs during President Yoon Suk Yeol's visit to Prague last week, and 13 of those deals are related to nuclear energy partnership between the two countries. For more on this, I have Nicola Smith, a correspondent for British daily The Telegraph. Nicola, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I also have Celio Fioretti, a correspondent for French daily Croix. Celio, it's good to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Right, Nicola, what were your major takeaways from the summit between the leaders of South Korea and the Czech Republic that took place in Prague last Thursday local time?
Well, first of all, there were the kind of symbolic big picture statements. There was the reinforcing of the strategic relationship, talks on how to advance that relationship across a number of fields. So we're looking at nuclear energy, trade and investment, cybersecurity, infrastructure, tourism, a real range of subjects. The two leaders were also underscoring the need to jointly tackle global challenges, such as violations of international law, climate change, cyber threats, global supply chain security. And in that context, they were talking about their shared geopolitical concerns, most notably Russia's aggression against Ukraine, developments on the Korean Peninsula, and how Russia has been violating UN Security Council resolutions in its cooperation with North Korea. There was also some agreement on how to cooperate in the businesses in the reconstruction of Ukraine, which is another important subject. But a large part of the visit was also very focused on progressing this deal by Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power to build 2 nuclear power plants in the Czech Republic. The company was chosen as a preferred bidder in July, but at the moment this project is facing a legal challenge over intellectual property by Westinghouse Electric, and so President Yoon was focused on helping to try and keep that deal on track. That was discussed at the summit. As if it's finalized next year, then this deal is worth $17.3 billion, and it will mark Korea's second nuclear power plant export following a similar one in the United Arab Emirates.
Right, and before we delve further into Korea's pursuit of nuclear energy, Celia, what do you believe was notable during the working luncheon meeting, I believe, between President Yoon Suk Yeol and Czech Prime Minister Petr FIALA last Friday local time?
Yeah, in the afternoon of the second day of the visit, Yoon had a small group meeting and luncheon with the Czech Prime Minister Petr FIALA, and they both attended a signing ceremony for the 56 MOUs, as you mentioned, aimed at institutionalizing the cooperation between the two countries in various fields, as we said just before, building on their robust nuclear energy alliance, as we can say. The two nations plan to broaden the collaboration into key areas beyond nuclear energy, including policy consultation between the two countries, but also on some very strategic topic for Korea: defense, the batteries for electric vehicles, scientific research. All that will be included in this plan of investments of $37 million over the next 10 years to promote this research between the two countries. Also, there's a big focus on energy production, hydrogen, of course, nuclear energy, to create and help the Czech Republic to move to a green energy era. On the margin also of this meeting with Yoon Suk Yeol and the Czech Prime Minister, they both visited Doosan Skoda Power, a company owned by Doosan Enerbility, that produces steam turbine that is a major component in nuclear reactor. So the two leaders signed a turbine blade at the factory, really reaffirming their commitment together to boost and help with the Czech knowledge and the Korean engineering to create better reactors that will probably aim to be sold all across Europe, because Korea is pursuing an export policy for nuclear energy in Europe. So KHNP, the main constructor for a nuclear reactor in Korea, will develop side to side with the Czech Doosan Skoda Power plans to develop the new reactor. And this visit, this burgeoning relationship between the two leaders is not the last one. The Czech Prime Minister is supposed to come to Korea next year, and he expressed his anticipation to come there.
Right. Nicola, Celio mentioned South Korea is hoping that its planned nuclear energy project with the Czech Republic will pave it perhaps a tangible path into the European nuclear energy market. What are your prospects with regard to this plan?
Well, I would say that the China and Russia at the moment are accounting for most of the world's reactors, and they are home, between them, they are home to 60% of roughly 70 reactors that were built over the last decade. And China's made rapid gains, both in terms of the sheer capacity of its technology. It has 56 reactors in operation. It's tied with France in terms of how many reactors it has worldwide. It's worldwide. The US is leading, but China is coming second. Russia has 33, and it's caught up with Japan. Russia also holds nearly 50% share of global uranium enrichment. So Russia and China are really leading the global nuclear trade. At the same time, we saw last year at COP28 that the US and 21 other countries, including South Korea, committed to tripling nuclear energy by 2050. And that would require at least 600 nuclear reactors. And at the moment, only 160 are being planned worldwide. So the opportunity is there for sure. And South Korean firms have already established themselves as global leaders in nuclear construction, in the nuclear construction space. So South Korea is already actively pursuing other deals in Europe. It's conducting a feasibility study for nuclear reactors in the Netherlands, and it's also in discussions with the Polish government. And there are plans to also take part in the bidding process for projects in Finland and Sweden. And so the opportunities are really there. Geopolitics is also playing a role in this. There is a lot more focus on nuclear energy because of energy security concerns. And so there will be many countries that won't want to necessarily have Russian companies or Chinese companies investing in such a sensitive sphere. And something that's so crucial to national security. This has been an issue in the UK. The UK has ruled out Russian investors in nuclear power, and Chinese investment has been controversial in the UK. So for a country like South Korea, a democracy and ally to other democracies, the opportunities are there. I think when it comes to Europe, this Westinghouse decision and the ruling on intellectual property could be very crucial in determining the momentum of South Korea's progress into Europe, whether that slows or whether that accelerates, depending what the decision is.
Right, indeed. And staying with the legal concerns, Celio, France's EDF also launched an appeal against the Czech Republic's decision to select as the preferred bidder a consortium led by Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power. Could you tell us a bit more about the appeal and also a bit about the French multinational electric utility company?
Yes, EDF, through that appeal on the Czech decision, seeks to ensure the fairness of the decision because they think maybe it was not exactly fair. And EDF is joining the US company Westinghouse in that legal pursuit against KHNP and in Korea for the licensing agreement for the parts of the reactors. Korea has been battling for a few years with that kind of issue, and EDF has been quite distant on the issue. But now that it lost the bid against Korea, they're a bit bitter about this because EDF has been the major player in Europe for nuclear energy, and losing against an outsider, someone new in the competition, feel like a bit threatening for their business. So they want to maybe try as best as they could to maybe reduce the momentum of Korea. Because EDF has been on a bad streak these latter years with a high cost, higher than expected, and long delays. The new reactor in Flamanville in France was delayed for 12 years, and the same one in the UK at Hinkley Point also has been delayed now again. It was supposed to open, to be finished in 2027. It will be finished now in 2031, so big delays which tarnish the image of EDF. So that's why some countries would prefer to choose Korea that ensure the delays are respected and the cost remains as planned on the contract. So we'll see what the outcome of the appeal will be with the judges. Maybe Korea will try to reach a compromise with both parties to make sure everyone can get out of the situation as best as they can. You could say it's a good news, but I would say the main issue for Korea for the future, aside this legal issue, is the ensuring quality. Because it's one thing to have a low-cost reactor, but it's another thing to keep the maintenance cost as low as possible and have as few issues as possible. And that's the whole risk with projects that are supposed to last for 50 years. A nuclear reactor is something long. So I think that's on that Korea really needs to prove it can be as good as the other competitor.
Right. In the meantime, Nicola, a number of foreign media outlets have covered South Korea's steady pursuit of nuclear energy under the Yoon administration. Do tell us a bit about this coverage that is. And second, do you believe Korea's pivot towards nuclear energy under the Yoon administration falls in line perhaps with the broader global shift towards clean energy in recent years?
Well, first of all, if you look at the coverage that we've seen on South Korea and the nuclear sector, there has been a focus on South Korea's shift back to nuclear energy, which was a reversal from the previous administration, and a very strategic shift in terms of how South Korea generates its energy, how it's going to meet its net zero goals. Again, it feeds into the energy security debate as well. So the coverage has really looked at how much South Korea has generated from nuclear reactors, and this year, in the first half of this year, it generated more from nuclear reactors than coal and gas for the first time. And there are plans to add 4 more nuclear plants that would raise the number of nuclear reactors to 30 by 2038. And now there's targets for nuclear to provide at least 30% of the country's electricity by 2030. And previously we've seen around 68% of electricity came from fossil fuels between 2010 to 2023. And so now the main source of clean energy is from nuclear power. Renewable energy is up, but it still remains below 6%. And Korea is trying to reach this target of a 40% cut to greenhouse gases from 2018 levels by 2030. So I think the attention is really focused on how Korea performs in this way, whether it could be a blueprint for other countries that want to shift more towards nuclear energy. And so, people will really be assessing Korea's progress on this front. To the second part of your question, does this fall in line with the global pivotal switch or turn towards nuclear energy? Nuclear energy certainly seems to be making a comeback. South Korea has bet on nuclear power in terms of energy security, and many other countries are also stepping up their nuclear sectors for that reason. To boost their energy security through nuclear, and also at the same time to meet net zero goals. So as I mentioned before, the COP28 climate summit last year, there was a major agreement between 22 countries that pledged to triple nuclear energy. And global nuclear energy is expected to rise by nearly 3% per year on average through 2026, according to the International Energy Agency. We're going to see key growth in France, Japan, China, India, South Korea, and Europe. But at the same time, you also have to take into consideration the costs of overruns, project delays. Also, public sentiment is not always on board. There are various national reasons for this, depending country to country. And one nuclear power plant requires 10 million components. So that's a massive undertaking for any nuclear reactor to be built.
Right, indeed. And beyond nuclear energy, Celio, in an interview with a Czech daily in Prague last week, President Yoon Suk Yeol asserted that South Korea can counter North Korea's nuclear threats without arming itself with nuclear weapons. What do you believe is the significance of this latest statement?
Yeah, indeed, President Yoon Suk Yeol said Friday that South Korea is not considering developing its own nuclear weapon, and it's focusing on strengthening the relationship with the US to counter North Korea's nuclear threat. Yoon reiterated that South Korea is committed to the Nuclear Consultative Group, the NCG, that was created April last year with US President Joe Biden. And in July this year, they also published a new nuclear strategy guideline aimed at using US nuclear weapon in case of an emergency with North Korea. So that's the official stance of the South Korean government. But there's a little bit of turmoil these days, a big heated debate about whether or not South Korea should think about developing its own nuclear weapon, because the US election is coming soon and we don't know what will be the effect of it on South Korea. If Trump were to win the election, he mentioned many times that he wants to withdraw from the peninsula, which could pose a major security threat to South Korea if the US troops and US assets would be off the peninsula, off the region. So that's why some people think South Korea should develop its own self-defense. So I think that comment from the president is a way to reassure the US partner that, no, people are talking about this, but we're not there yet, and we keep working with the US, we'll keep developing our strategy and be committed to that alliance. And also it's a way also to the Korean audience to say we should stay calm about this. It's not an issue right now, and even if Trump was supposed to win, it's not an emergency right now to really act. And Korea, if it was supposed to develop its own homegrown nuclear weapon, would be against international treaty with the non-proliferation treaty. So it would be a bad image for the country. So I think President Yoon wants to really reassure everyone in the room that it's not an option yet.
Right. And staying with security, Nicola, speaking exclusively with Arirang TV, Czech President Petr Pavel also highlighted the importance of efforts on the security front in light of growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia amid the latter's war in Ukraine, of course. What do you suppose, Nicola, the broader implications of these pledges to commitment, that is, to security among like-minded partners, even as they seek economic advancements?
Well, in the interview, the Czech leader spoke about the struggle between democracies and autocracies. He focused very strongly on that, and this is a theme that comes up again and again and has been over the past few years. And South Korea is very much viewed as a democratic partner, as a like-minded nation, not only for the Czech Republic, but for Europe more generally, and the US, and this is reflected in NATO also, which views South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand really as natural Asia-Pacific partners. And these partnerships are really gaining prominence, especially at the moment as Russia and China are deepening their ties, Russia and North Korea with the war in Ukraine. There's really the view from Europe that the fate of Europe and Indo-Pacific are intertwined, and that like-minded nations and democracies really have to collectively face the challenges that are arising from Russia, from an increasingly powerful China, from North Korea. And so in practical terms, this can lead to greater cooperation on issues like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, countering disinformation, defence. But also, as you mentioned, economic growth. It does mean some difficult decisions for countries in terms of how they approach, especially China, as well as Russia. They can't be seen purely through the prism of trade relationships and economic investment, and that has historically certainly been a view of China. Britain went through this golden era of seeing China as an economic market and a place for great growth and trade, but more and more these relationships need to be reevaluated, just in keeping with the current global security situation and keeping that context in mind.
Right, a valid point, if I may say so myself. Celio, speaking simply then, how do you assess the Yoon administration's latest diplomatic campaign in Europe?
I would say it was quite successful, while its predecessor mostly sold the Korean cultural package, movies and drama and music to European audience. Yoon has been more focused on strategic asset, energy and weapon, and Korea has really grasped successfully the opportunity of the war in Ukraine, with Europe rearming and needing weapons. It really was able to provide all the products that European countries needed at the time. And now it's recognized as a major player in the weapons market. And Korean weapons are recognized as reliable and also very easily adaptable to different type of army and different type of condition. So I can tell you, it's from my sources in France, for example, Korea now is taken as a very serious competitor, more than it was maybe like 5 years ago. So they're already trying to make new strategies to keep up with the competition that Korea is imposing on Europe. So I think on that side, Yoon's policy in Europe, focusing on strategic assets, has been very successful.
Right, and before we end, maybe a word from you, Nicola, as well, about the assessment, your assessment, that is, of the latest diplomatic endeavour by President Yoon in the Czech Republic.
I think it definitely raises the profile of Korea from a geopolitical point of view, I would say, as a strong partner to Europe, as a like-minded democracy. And I think in the current context of rising challenges in the Indo-Pacific and in Europe, that it helps to really firmly set Korea on the global stage as a partner to other democracies.
Right, and as a global pivotal state, like the Yoon administration has been saying. All right, Nicola, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Celio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, that ends this edition of Issues and Insiders. As always, thank you for watching.